Alright, so move on to the next segment. I'll be sharing my UFC 301 main event prediction between Alexandre Pantoja and Steve Erceg. So, this will be the main event of UFC 301, where Alexandria Pantoja will be defending his flyweight championship against Steve Erceg. Now, my storylines heading into the main event of UFC 301 is Alexandria Pantoja ready to defend his flyweight championship in the main event of UFC 301 in his home country of Brazil. And I understand that the UFC has a lot of ethnicities that do fight in the octagon in the MMA world, but there has to be no better feeling in the world than fighting and defending your world title in front of your home country. And I am very happy for Alexandre Pantoja and Jose Aldo, which I'll get into in my next prediction. But I'm just so happy for these guys fighting in their home country of Brazil for UFC 301. I know Alexandre Pantoja is going to put on a show for his home country of Brazil. Is he going to successfully retain his flyweight championship in the main event of UFC 301? Now, my next storyline. Will this moment be too big for Steve Erceg? And what I mean by that is, I don't know how the UFC managed to pull this off, but I'm looking at this, and Steve Erceg has only competed in 3 total UFC fights, and he's already in line for a flyweight championship opportunity. Now, I understand the flyweight division is kind of cold right now. There really isn't much competition right now for Alexandria Pantoja, the reigning defending flyweight champion. However, it's just strange to me that this man, Steve Erceg, is getting a world title match with 3 fights in the UFC, and he's never competed at a stage like this. He's never competed on a UFC main card pay-per-view, or nonetheless a UFC main event pay-per-view. So we're going to see if Steve Erceg is ready for the big time moment, ready to become a world champion this early in his UFC career. Now, my tail of the tape for this fight. You have Alexandria Pantoja, who is 27. He has 27 victories, 5 losses. Currently, he has 8 victories coming away of knockout. He has 10 submission victories. Currently, the reigning defending flyweight champion stands at 5'5" and has a reach advantage of 67 inches. Now I'm looking at Steve Erceg. Steve Erceg has 12 victories, 1 loss in his MMA career. He has 2 victories come away of knockout, 6 victories come away of submission. Currently the 10th ranked contender in the flyweight division, stands at 5'8" and has a reach advantage of 68 inches. So the height and the reach advantage goes to the challenger, Steve Erceg, over Alexandria Pantoja for this UFC main event. Now, these are my game plans for each respective flyweight fighter to follow. If they plan on walking out of UFC 301, plan on walking out of Brazil, the new flyweight champion. Starting off with the challenger, Steve Erceg. I do believe that in order to defeat Alexandre Pantoja, which is a tall task, he's going to have to use his boxing background. And I think Steve Erceg, the film that I've watched of him, the fights that I've seen of him fighting at the Apex, I think it's going to be best for him to use his boxing background to defeat Alexandre Pantoja. I think it's best for him to keep Alexandre Pantoja second guessing, using jabs, using straight right hands, that boxing background, to win the flyweight championship against Alexandre Pantoja. And last but not least, I do believe that Steve Erceg has to be unpredictable. And I think he has to use everything that he can in his toolbox and his repertoire to defeat Alexandre Pantoja, because that is a tall task for an elite pound-for-pound fighter in the UFC today. Now, going with the champion, Alexandre Pantoja. I think it's best for him to out-wrestle Steve Erceg, because Steve Erceg does have that wild card factor, the boxing background, if the fight is left standing on his feet. However, even though Steve Erceg, like I just said a few moments ago, has 6 victories come away of submission, I think he's still unproven to me as a grappler and as a proven wrestler, because he has not faced the competition, a high competition, competing at a high competition like Alexandre Pantoja. So I think it's best for Alexandre Pantoja to out wrestle Steve Erceg, He's one of the best wrestlers in the UFC. Try to keep this fight on the ground as much as possible because Steve Erceg, like I just said, has that wild card factor to him of that boxing background as a wild card striker. Next, I think it's best that Alexandre Pantoja shoots for a lot of takedowns in this fight. If you guys look at his championship fight that he had against Brandon Royval, Alexandre Pantoja landed not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, not six, not seven, but you guessed it, 8 takedowns against Brandon Royval and that championship and that outstanding championship performance just not too long ago. So I think that's going to be best to frustrate Steve Erceg during this fight. And last but not least, I think Alexandre Pantoja needs to use his cardiovascular endurance, use that cardiovascular gas tank if needed to take Steve Erceg to the deep waters, to those deep championship rounds, and drown him. Because like I just said, Steve Erceg has not been at this moment in his MMA career, never been on the main card of a UFC pay-per-view, let alone a main event of UFC 3, a main event of UFC. So this is going to be huge, and I think Alexandre Pantoja is going to drown him in the deep waters if necessary and use that championship experience to his advantage in this fight. But with that being said, I'm going to go with Alexandre Pantoja to successfully retain his flyweight championship by a knockout in the 3rd round against Steve Erceg in the main event of UFC 301. Now, whether it's a stoppage or a submission victory, I do believe that Alexandre Pantoja is going to stop Steve Erceg in this fight. And I do believe that Alexandre Pantoja is going to pull off the victory because, like I keep touching up on, Steve Erceg is an unproven fighter. This is his 4th total fight in the UFC. He's never fought on a UFC main card pay-per-view. He's never fought in a main event of a UFC pay-per-view. The stage and the bright lights might be too bright for him. Fighting a pound-for-pound fighter in Alexandre Pantoja. And I do believe Alexandre Pantoja is going to use his championship experience, his MMA IQ, to defeat Steve Erceg in the main event of UFC 301. And I think he's going to use the Brazil crowd, him defending the flyweight championship in his home country of Brazil, to his advantage to fire him up for this fight. I just don't see him losing the flyweight title in front of his home crowd, in front of his home country of Brazil. I have Alexandre Pantoja once again knocking off another flyweight contender in Steve Erceg in the main event of UFC 301. But that is my fight prediction for this weekend's fight in the UFC between Alexandre Pantoja and Steve Erceg.